what we're going to talk about today, and in 45 minutes, I'm going to give you the high-level overview. Why should it matter? Why do we want good observations, and how do we get them? So we're going to talk about specifically, how do I evaluate an individual observer, and what would that look like? But first, we're going to talk about why is that important. So let's go through a little primer. This is interactive, all right? So make sure everybody's awake. Make sure you raise your hands. Do you believe if you increase the number of inspections or observations within your facility or within your organization, is that going to prevent injuries? Is that going to reduce incidents? Show of hands, yes? Good, all right? We see it so often, right? Repeatedly. The blue line is inspections go up, incidents go down. Now, real quick, is that the only thing that matters? No, obviously not, right? If all I did was going out and collecting observations, I could lose weight very quickly, right? If I stand on a scale every day, I'm getting observations, right? I wear a Fitbit, right? I'm getting all kinds of observations. Does that help me get better? No, I have to act on the data. So what we're talking about is just because you're collecting observations doesn't mean you're getting good observations. So let's ask another question. We talked about the number of inspections is good. How about the number of people doing inspections, right? So the locations with the fewest observers, is that, would they have the most incidents, true or false? So fewer people observing, more injuries, yes? Yes, right? So each of those dots represents a location, right? A facility, an area, right? A department. The incidents are on the bottom. The fewer the people observing, the more injuries we tend to see. Why is that? Well, yeah, more eyes out in the field, right? If you're one safety person and there's 1,000 people on the floor, what are the odds you're going to get out and see everything? Slim to none. So we need more people out there, and that's what our data shows. Our data says the more people, the better. Let's talk about this. The locations where you have more safety observers, and when I say safety observers, I mean professional safety, right? Their title is safety. So the locations with the highest percentage of safety observers, do they have the fewest incidents, true or false? Show of hands for true. Show of hands for false. Interesting. Most of you guys didn't vote, so you're waiting to see the next slide, right? Locations where the only people collecting safety data, if they're safety professionals, had the highest number of injuries. I'm going to repeat that. The locations where the only people collecting safety data were safety professionals, those locations had the highest number of injuries. Why? Exactly. She said it right here. Nobody on the floor was involved. Why is that important? It's called ownership. I give you a great war story, right? I'm filling in for a site safety manager on a construction project. The superintendent, who's in charge of operations on the project, comes up to me. We're on the first floor. He says, Cary, there's a guy on the third floor standing on the top of a ladder. What do you think he said to me? Go take care of it. It's exactly what he said. Go take care of it. What should he have done? He should have seen the hazard and corrected the hazard, coached the employee. He didn't. Why? Because the ownership of safety, he felt, belonged with the safety person. That's where we're failing. We have to get people involved. We have to shift that ownership of safety to everybody. So a diverse involvement performs best. So more inspections by more observers and a more diverse group, right? So why is good quality important? Well, if you have poor quality, you're basically going to not trust it. You're not going to act on it. And if you don't act on the information coming in, then why bother collecting it? That's what I'm going to say is the observer. right? I'll just pencil whip it or not do it at all. So then as I get fewer observations, I get less insight, which means more injuries, and then I'm reacting to injuries instead of preventing them. And that's typically where we land. So we need to be able to get more people involved, but as we get more people involved, we have to be able to coach them to get better observations. So one of the biggest things that we see from poor quality is nothing's ever wrong. They go out and they do these observations and they say, everything's good, nothing's bad. In our study, we call it safety truth number 3, flying blind, which means nothing's ever wrong until when? Until you have an injury. What do you do when you have an injury? You have to do an incident investigation. During the incident investigation, you find out how long have they been doing it that way. Did they just start doing it that way? No. Typically, you find out they've been doing it for quite a while. Why couldn't we spot it through observations and prevent it, right? Correct it and prevent it before it led to an injury. So flying blind, or we call it 100% safe, the frequency that people turn in 100% safe is a metric that says something's wrong. Typically, it's cultural. It's not acceptable to put the data in for some reason or another. I either fear, right? I make somebody look bad. Don't make me look bad. Or if I'm a safety person, if I put in these unsafes, it makes it look like I'm not doing my job. So it's easier to correct it and not report it, right, than it is to report it. So we have to address the culture there. But understand, if you see a lot of pencil whipped, nothing's ever wrong, you've got a broken process, right? And what this is saying here is the higher the frequency of 100% safe inspections, the more injuries you will see. The higher the frequency of 100% safe, the more injuries you're going to see. On the flip side, and this kind of goes back to if you don't act on the data that's coming in, if you keep seeing a lot of unsafe observations repeatedly, that's bad, right? That's like this. I go in, I'm doing my safety observations, and there's oil on the floor, right? Is that a hazard? Yes or no? Yeah. What do I need to do? I need to clean it up. So I mark it as a hazard. That's an unsafe. I clean it up. I go about my business. I come back tomorrow. What do I see? I see the same thing. I just cleaned it up yesterday. But there's oil on the floor today. So it's a hazard. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to record it. And I'm going to move on. I do that every day for a week. Oil on the floor, clean it up, report it. What's the problem? What have I failed to do? Yeah, where is the oil coming from, and why can't I stop it? I call this the WhackaMole game, and we do it too often in safety. I go out, I find a hazard, I whack it, right? I pat myself on the back because I found something that was bad. I convinced you that I'm smarter than you. I told you it's wrong. I'm good, you're bad, it's fixed. Let's move on. If we don't address why it's happening, address the causal factors, whether it's cultural or physical, then we're not doing a lot of good. So we have to be able to trend this information, right? And be willing to look at the risk, right, in a way that it's acceptable, right? We have to look at it proactively, saying, I want to see these unsafes because nobody's gotten hurt yet. It's a gift, right? Nobody's gotten hurt, and if I see this trend, I can stop it and prevent it. But if I don't, if it gets buried through cultural biases or cultural blocking or barrier, then I'll never get the information, and I'm going to go back to reacting to injuries. Is that where we want to be in safety? That's where we're at, folks. Most of us are reacting to the injuries. So think of observations as a pre-incident investigation. Think of it as a pre-incident investigation. Everything's there except for somebody actually getting injured. So if I approach my observations with that in mind, and I uncover that risk, I'm good. And if you don't think companies are doing it and doing it well, I was in the nuclear power industry. Not only did we know something bad could happen, we anticipated that it would happen, and we spent a great deal of time trying to figure out where that injury was going to come or where that incident was going to come, because that could be a really bad day in the nuclear power industry if you had an incident. We couldn't afford to wait and react. Where you want to be is continually find and address these observations, these at-risk observations, and act on them, address the causal factors from a diverse, widespread team. Notice how the risk isn't zero. And I'm going to repeat that. The risk is not zero. There is no zero risk. There is no zero harm. But that is the fewest incidents that we tend to see, is to have a robust system where we're finding the at-risks, and when we see a trend, we're addressing the causal factors. That's where you want to be. So let's talk about a few metrics. This is kind of busy, kind of a busy slide, but I kind of broken up into primary and secondary metrics. The first thing when it comes to observations is you got to turn them in. That's participation. I can't even evaluate beyond, if you don't turn in anything, all I can see is zero. It's hard to coach somebody if they don't turn anything in. The next thing is safe observations. Show of hands, how many people are actually collecting safe observations today? Good, good, good. Safe observations are important. Real quick primer on why do we collect safe observations. If I only collect unsafe observations, and I've got two crews, one has 5 unsafes, one has 0 unsafes. We're going to take that information, we're going to evaluate which one's safer. Which one's safer? 5 unsafes, boo. 0 unsafes, yay. Which one's safer? Yay. Yay, right? He has 0 unsafes. What assumption did we make? We assumed somebody went out and evaluated this crew, or location, or whatever. We assumed somebody went out and evaluated them and found nothing wrong. What could have happened? Nobody went out and looked at them. 0, OSHA has a saying, right? If it's not documented, what? It didn't happen. On average, within our system, we typically see 30 to 35 safe observations for every unsafe observation. I could at least go to his crew and say, here are the things that were working well, and I can prove that it happened, that I went out and evaluated his crew, and here's the evidence. That's why we collect safe observations. We also, when I say what is a safe observation, an observation in my terminology is a specific condition or behavior. This person wearing a hard hat, that's one observation. He's wearing a hard hat, that's 2 observations. There's 5 cords in the room, I checked their GFCI, that's 5 observations. So now I'm getting individual observations. So we have safe observations, and the metric is safe per inspection average. Unsafes, right? You're going to get an unsafe total, but unsafe per inspection average is the one that I like to look at. Why? Because I can compare one person to the next or one group to the next. The next one is an interesting one. One of the quality metrics for an individual is their frequency of 100% safe inspections. The more 100% safe inspections versus the total, right? The higher that is, the more I need to go out and coach that person. The severity, we assign a severity, which is basically the potential for injury for a specific at-risk that I find, right? Fall protection would have a higher severity than, say, PPE, right? And then the details. When they find an unsafe, right, or an at-risk, did they put comments? Did they tell me what it's about? I'll give you a reason why it's important. How many people use ladders? Show of hands. A lot, right? If the item on your checklist says properly use the ladder, safe or unsafe, and I put unsafe, and the highest unsafe count for the week was ladder use. How many ways can I improperly use a ladder? A lot, right? If I had no comments, how does that help me? Right? Go work safer on ladders. That's my feedback. But was it, hey, I wasn't using 3 points of contact, or hey, we're standing on the top of our ladders? That gives me something more actionable. That's where the comments come in. Now, there's a couple secondary ones, which is, what did I look at? So I have a checklist with all these categories: fall protection, electrical, ladders, housekeeping, administration. What did they look at on the checklist? A lot of times we say, go out and do an inspection, but we don't define what that inspection is. What do you think most people look at when they go out and look at inspections? What's the easiest thing to observe from a safety standpoint, category-wise? PPE. Housekeeping. Right? PPE, then housekeeping, right? Most companies, half the observations people turn in are PPE related. The purpose of doing observations is to prevent injuries, right? We're proactively looking to see what are we doing wrong, right, compared to our plan, and we're going to try and fix it before it leads to an injury. But if I address, most of my observations are looking at PPE, what kind of injuries am I going to prevent? PPE-related injuries, right? If I focus on PPE from an observation standpoint, how is that going to help me prevent falls? What do you think? How is that going to help me prevent electrical injuries if I'm focusing on hard hats and safety glasses? What we typically see is the harder it is to observe, the fewer the observations we tend to see. So as you start to get a big, diverse group going out and collecting data, the first thing you're going to get is a ton of PPE observations, right? Where are my veterans? Show of hands. Excellent. Thank you for your service. In the military, we did qual cards. There's two things you had to do: get the knowledge and demonstrate the knowledge. It should be no different. If you're rolling out an observation program, don't assume everybody knows everything about safety, right? We just said PPE was the easiest, right? So assume everybody can do PPE observations. But in order to get to housekeeping, they need to have some training, and they need to go demonstrate they can show safe and unsafe when it comes to housekeeping. What's the next thing? We'll say ladders is the next. I now train them on ladders. They demonstrate ladders. And you basically, hey, you can only observe those categories that you've qualified for, right? And then we build people up and do inspections on the higher functions like fall protection, electrical. So don't assume, hey, Cary said we need everybody in the organization to go out and collect observations. You're now all safety observers, right? Go out and do observations. It's going to fail horribly. It's got to be a systematic approach in order to roll it out effectively. Okay, so there's some quality metrics. We're going to talk about each of them in turn. All right. Any of the new safety management systems, ANSI Z10, OSAS 18001, anybody who's done quality work, there's a continuous improvement loop. Plan, do, check, act, right? We have a plan, right? We're going to go out and do observations. We're going to go out and collect observations. If you don't look at your data and do something with the data, we call that something. That loop is called the plan, do, hope, pray method, right? We hope and we pray nothing's going to happen. We don't want to hope and pray. We want to assure their safety, right? So this is where we're going to monitor the data coming in, and we're going to provide feedback. That's the study act or check act. So let's take a look at that. Some of these are screenshots. They're really tiny. If you want this slide deck, I'm sure we can get it to you. You can stop by my booth and give me a card. I can send it to you. If you want any bigger blown up examples, I can. So trust me, those are numbers right there. So real quick, the easiest thing to start with is what I call counting cards, right? And that is, did you do an inspection, yes or no, right? Either did it or didn't do it. That's the top level. Did you go out and do observations? And this is just a count of, to me, an inspection is just a collection of observations. If you use a different term, understand when I say inspection, It's just a collection of observations housed within one report. Okay? So, did you do any inspections? And what are the average observations per inspection, safe and unsafe? So how many safes do you typically find? And how many unsafes do you typically find? I can then take those numbers because I've got, let's say everybody, you guys are all in my organization. You've all done inspections or not done any inspections. I can quickly see what is your average, and I can compare it against the company average. And I can see how you differ from everybody else. It's that simple. In our organization, we have about 500 million observations in our system. We can even benchmark outside of your organization, but let's just look at your organization as a whole, right? You're going to quickly develop patterns and see, hey, when we go out and do observations, this is what it typically looks like. You'll get averages. I can compare that to the observer and then see, does that make sense for the work that they're doing? Does that make sense based on what we typically see? So if our average unsafe per inspection for the company was 1.5 and you find 0, you're going to be very different than the rest of the people. Okay? But first of all, before you start looking, and I should have primed with this, before you start looking at numbers, they're just numbers. Until you set expectations, they're meaningless. He did 3 inspections this week. Is that good or bad? You say it's average. Compared to what? He was supposed to do 5. Is that good?
Yeah, how many job sites you have.
Right? If you don't set expectations, the numbers are just numbers. And you'll try to infer some kind of meaning out of these numbers when there is none. You have to set expectations around the metrics. Sometimes it means collecting some data, then setting the bar, going, hey, this is kind of our average. Let's draw the line here and then look up and down. Okay? But you have to set the expectations, right? And then based on that, I can calibrate the individual. Hey, here's your averages. Here's the company averages. Here's where I expect you to be. Let's set a date, check your averages in a month, 3 months, and then we can go from there and see how you're doing, right? I can also figure out, have a discussion with you, hey, you're not finding any unsafes, why? I can uncover the cultural aspect and then hope to overcome those barriers with you, right? Hey, it makes me look bad. I'm a safety professional. If I put these unsafes, it'll look like I'm not doing my job. Now we can have a conversation, we can recalibrate and move on. I'm slowly but surely improving the bar with every observer out in the field, right? And we just said, we don't need more safety folks. We need more people within the organization that are safety minded. And I would rather coach 20 people over the course of a week or a month and make them better observers than try to go out personally and get more observations for myself. Because if those 20 people improve, the next month I'll have 20 new people I can work on and improve, and eventually we'll have everybody getting better. More observations, right? Which is the reverse of poor quality. As I improve my quality, we'll trust it more, we'll act on it more accordingly, because we can bring it to management and say, here's why I want that investment. Here's what we're seeing. If we don't make that change, here's what we can encounter. Now you have empirical data that you can use to justify your investment, right? Okay, so this is just getting the observations, right? And then we have the basic safe and unsafe per inspection, right? The next thing is within, I can break up the quality metrics. So really it's the 6 things that I just talked about. Your participation, which is we do inspections per week, right? How many inspections did you do per week? And there's a number, right? How many safe per inspection? How many unsafe per inspection? How many comments with your unsafes and the frequency of your all safe? And the arrows are basically, hey, here's where you were, the arrows represent how did you improve or not improve over time, So you can take a look at where you were, coach, and then measure the progress, right? So that's fairly straightforward, right? And the reason we do the averages is because if you go out and do a lot of inspections, right, and you do full comprehensive inspections and you're getting hundreds of observations per inspection, but you're just a line supervisor and you're just doing a short one for your crew and maybe you get 20 observations. The reason we do the averages is so I can compare everybody all within the same scope. Are they going to look different? Sure, they're going to look different because your expectations are different than yours. It's not about saying they're good or bad. This is not what it's all about. And metrics, I have a love-hate relationship with metrics. Metrics can give you insight. They can help tell you, are you going in the right direction? But too often we take a metric and say, bam, that metric must be the one. That's the magic silver bullet. And then we start managing to the metrics. Because if I say, hey, you need X metric in order to be a good observer, they'll go out and they'll make it happen. Does that improve our observation quality? No, it is not about the metrics. It's about the conversations that are going to occur so that I can coach you and make you a better observer. That's what it's all about. Okay. The next thing is, and this is one of the secondary metrics, and that is what do you look at when you go out and make observations? If you take nothing away from this, I want you to consider how you're currently collecting observations and is there a better way to do it? And the biggest thing that I do is counting observations, right? Each condition, each behavior is one observation. So that, and it's broken out by category, right? So PPE has its group of questions, fall protection has its group of questions. Your typical checklist, right? Whether it's behavioral, whether it's condition or compliance based. Now I can quickly see which categories you collect data in, which ones don't you. That's going to help me figure out where are people looking, where are people focusing their attention, where are they not. I can then take that information and by looking at the gaps, I can then say, hey, I need you to go out this week and look at this particular category and here's why. It could be we have a trend that we want to correct and we need more observations to see if we're improving, or it could be it's one that we're ignoring and we need to go out and make sure that we're looking at it. So break it out. Because what I don't want to see, and I still see it today, is you have a checklist and you have a category, let's say it's PPE, and you mark safe or unsafe for your entire inspection. If you're doing that still, I implore you, please stop. Because if you have 1,000 people or 100 people or even 10 people that you're observing and you just mark as safe or an unsafe, right? What does that mean? If I saw 1,000 employees and one of them out of 900 or one of them out of 1,000 wasn't wearing their hard hat, is that a safe or an unsafe if I'm just marking some generic box? In addition, if we see that X and say fall protection is our issue, how do we know we're improving if we're not counting specific observation, your percent safe? Okay, bless you. So, are they only looking at the low-hanging fruit, which is the easiest to observe? I wouldn't know it unless I'm looking and peeling back the layers of what he's focused on. I can then set aside a category, say, hey, we're going to go work on ladders. I'm going to do some training, and then we're going to get you trained up. Because here's what the typical issue is, right? How many people, safety folks, right? Most of you, right? How many people 30 years or more? Okay, 30 years or more. How long would it take you to take somebody off the floor, non-safety? How long would it take you to teach them to do an inspection, a full inspection like you do?
Days.
Days. So that they can recognize safe and unsafe for everything that they encounter. I think it would take longer than a few days. okay? You have 30 years worth of knowledge, right, that you're trying to impart to somebody on electrical hazards, fall protection, confined space, lockout, tagout, all that. So it takes a while. So focused inspections are key when you roll this out to non-safety folks. Meaning, when I do a safety inspection as a safety person, I tend to do a comprehensive inspection. I look at anything and everything. But how long would it take to train somebody to look at just PPE? A few minutes. And then they can go out and evaluate PPE. And then when he's good with PPE, I could teach him housekeeping, a few minutes. So over time, I'm building up his repertoire of what he's capable of correctly observing, right? As opposed to doing, hey, you're an observer, go out. And I assume you know what you're looking at because you had an OSHA 10 hour, right? That's what we have to change as well. Okay. Now, did your observations include comments? We talked about this. Without the comments, you're going to get a huge count of unsafes in a particular category. We have to now put a corrective action in place. Part of that corrective action is understanding the nature of the hazard. Just because it was unsafe, I don't know how it was unsafe, right? Fall protection, let's say not tied off. Were they not tied off at all? Were they tied off incorrectly? I don't know the answers to that. The comments are going to help me, right? It should tell a story of the hazard that was found and what they did about it, right? Did they do something to address the hazard? If you find something at risk, like my oil on the floor, I cleaned it up so it was corrected on the spot. Not every time you can correct something on the spot. Anybody have mobile vehicles, forklifts, stuff like that, right? If there's no backup alarm, can you fix that on the spot? Probably not. So you mark it unsafe, maybe you tag it out of service, and you have to order a part or get it for maintenance, but it's going to sit. I'm not going to sit there and wait till it happens. I mark it, I put it as an uncorrected, and I track it to closure. How long that takes is a metric. Are we finding stuff and not getting it corrected? That should be a metric you're tracking within your organization. Just because you identified a hazard doesn't mean it's corrected, right? Sure, it's tagged out for now, but we're going to figure out, whoa, why was it tagged out? I'll just take it off and drive it again, okay? So we need to be able to track these unsafes that are not corrected to closure. And that should be a metric for the individual, right? It should be a metric for your facility as well. Okay? And also, are we closing issues? Because one of the things that I see often too is you find a hazard, and just because I told the supervisor about it, I mark it as corrected. That's dangerous, right? Because it may not get corrected. So you should be spotting to see, are people saying something's corrected when it's impossible to have corrected it, right? Backup alarm's not on the loader, corrected on the spot, right? So make sure you're digging into the data and really reading what it's saying. One of the things too, if you have that global view of just marking an X on unsafe for the whole facility, you're not going to be able to drill down into that data. One of the things that we recommend is that when you find an observation, when you make an observation, you link it to a couple things. One is, where are you? It could be a facility, or if you have a very large facility, it could be an area within a facility, okay? I'm in my utility building, or I'm on my third floor, or I'm in the ABC project, okay? That's one thing. Another thing is, I'm typically observing people, right? People that are working. Or I'm observing something that somebody's responsible for that area. Let's take my oil on the floor, for example. Who does that belong to? Is that an operations team because it's in their area? Does it belong to maintenance? I don't know. But if I don't link the observation to that observed entity, and I put up here the creating, who created the hazard, If you don't know, then do I have any exposed people, right? If you're in an area near the oil, right, or near a guardrail that's missing and you're exposed to a fall, I would link the observation to her or her crew so that your manager knows about it, right? And eventually, right, if you don't know those two things, if there's nobody in the area, I don't know who created it, then it's the controlling entity, which is typically the host company, right, the plant manager or some internal maintenance team or something like that. Why is that important? Why should I link it to an entity at all? Why not just mark them and be done with it?
Who are you going to follow up with?
Who am I going to follow up with? Who's going to correct these, right? If I link observations to each of those crews, I can go to that crew's manager or that contractor or that work team or that department and show them, hey, here are the things we're seeing. Bam, here's your top issues. Because your issues are going to be different than yours, which is different than yours. They now have that information, and it's detailed because we put the comments. They can then go work with their team, be aware of what we're seeing, and be able to work proactively to address it. That's why I want you to start thinking about that. Link these observations to work teams. I typically do it by who's in charge. If there's a manager, there's a work team. Okay? All right. So make sure you're linking it to them so that they can trend each one of those individually, so that I know who needs coaching more than others. And I can recognize, positively recognize, those crews that are doing really well. Now, I'm going to give you an evaluation. I'm going to pop up on the screen, and we're going to look at an individual observer, and I want you to talk about how can we coach this observer to make them better. So, can you read that? No, so I'm going to walk you through it. The first thing is, we all went to kindergarten, right? When you do something really good, what does the teacher give you? A gold star. The more gold stars, what? The better, right? So each of those gold stars means thumbs up. So the first metric, you see a lot of gold stars. This individual observer, she has 5 stars for participation. We know she's doing more inspections than most people within the organization, right? She has 5 gold stars. Compared to everybody else within the organization, she's going out and she's doing observations. Thumbs up, right? That's good. Number 2, she's got 4 gold stars in safe per inspection. She likes to find safe observations more than most people within the organization. Thumbs up, right? Lots of gold stars, that's a thumbs up. At risk or unsafe per inspection, how many stars do you see? 1. Her percentile, which think of the bell curve, right? 2.4. That means 98% of the observers within our organization find more unsafes than this person. 98%. 98%. That's virtually everybody within the organization. So she's going out and doing these inspections. She never finds anything wrong, because the next one is the severity of the findings. Well, she never finds anything, so there is no severity. Comments per inspection. Well, she has no unsafe, so there are no comments. And her all safe is 1 star, because it basically says 100% of the time when she turns in an inspection, it's all safe. How can we coach this person? First of all, let me ask you, is she a good observer or a bad observer?
Bad observer.
How many people say bad? Okay, throw that out of your vocabulary right now. She is an observer. Does she need to be coached? Yes. She is not a bad observer. She's going out there and she thinks she's providing value. So much so, she's doing more observations and more inspections than most people within the organization. That doesn't make her bad. She's a prime coaching candidate, sure. Not bad. She is engaged in the process. What do we typically do when we get a card that's 100% safe? I know it because I do it. I roll my eyes, right? We have the opportunity to coach this person. How can we coach her? I can say, hey, go out and find more unsafes. Is that a way to coach her? No, please don't do that. I need to figure out why she's doing what she's doing. Walk through it with her. How simple is that? Hey, I got some time. You have some time to go do an observation? I'm not picking on you personally, by the way. I'm going to walk with her through the facility, and as I spot a hazard, I'm going to ask her about it, and I'm going to start coaching. And she goes, yeah, I'll just fix it and not report it. Now we can start talking culture. Well, why aren't you reporting it? Well, my manager said if I make him look bad, he would make my life difficult. Bingo, we just figured out why she's 100% safe all the time. I once had an operations manager go to his crew and say, I expect everybody to be 100% safe. What do you think he's going to get? 100% safe. Is that going to help us prevent injuries? No, I have a term for that. You guys can write this down. It's called appearance-based safety. Appearance-based safety. Everything looks good. Everything looks great. Then why are we having injuries? Well, it's because he didn't follow our process, right? Let's blame the worker. It's not us, it's him. Okay, so how can we coach her? We can walk through it. What else can we do? What else can we do? Anybody? Nobody? As you're coaching, as you're walking through, does she understand what we're trying to accomplish and why? What's in it for me? If you cannot answer that for each person, what's in it for me, you're going to keep getting this or this, the big goose egg. We have to define what's in it for me. Right? Why is this important? Why do I have to put in these unsafes? When I find an unsafe, why can't I just fix it? Right? Well, you can. Just like my oil on the floor. And what if somebody a week later slips on that oil on the floor? She fixed it every single day. But we never got to the causal factor, did we? Because nobody reported it. I had no idea there was an issue. How about you, the guy who doesn't wear his safety glasses? Every time I walk by, they're hanging around his neck. And I do like this, he puts them on. Then I walk away, what happens? Takes them right off. If I'm not reporting that, because I put it in, hey, I saw a hazard, right? I fixed it, so I'm not going to report it. It's the same thing. We're not trying to get people in trouble. We're trying to manage risk. I can't manage risk if I don't know where my risk resides. There's a book, if you get a chance, Wyke and Sutcliffe, called Managing the Unexpected. They talk about highly reliable organizations, HROs, just like nuclear power, right? Great examples on nuclear power, firefighting. They seek out these opportunities to improve. And if you don't like the terms, right, Scott Geller, he's big on this, right? Change your vocabulary. I have one organization that they use OFI. They don't use unsafe, they don't use at risk, they use OFI, which stands for Opportunity for Improvement, right? Opportunity for Improvement, OFI. So change the dynamics of the conversation. If it's a negative connotation, and if I'm putting negative connotation, it makes me, hey, I don't want to throw her under the bus, I like her. But this guy, I don't like him. I'll throw him under the bus like crazy. So we have to change the conversation. We have to change it. We have to make it acceptable and even beneficial. When you put unsafes in, that's a positive, right? We even have one organization, the CEO, if you find a highly critical, like a life-threatening or a high-severity type guy in a confined space with no air monitoring, no hull watch, for example, and you make it safe, he calls the observer at the end of the week. They collect the data. He calls them at the end of the week and says, thank you for saving a life. Thank you for saving a life. He found a potentially life-threatening hazard. He made it safe. But instead of going, what the hell's going on, right? And making it a culture of let's bury our risk, he's making it positive. When you found that, right, he's recognizing them and giving them that positive feedback that it's a good thing to do this. Why? Would you rather the CEO read it in a report that I found it and corrected it? Or would you rather read about it on the news that there was a fatality at your organization? So think about it like that. Okay, so let's talk about some summary and recommendations. Plan, do, check, act. Define the expectations, that's our plan. They go out and do the observations, that's our do. Monitor the progress is our checked. I prefer study as opposed to check. Check is like check a box. Study is I'm going to analyze the data. And then providing feedback is the act. It's that simple. However, I make it sound simple, but you have to be able to develop the metrics. You have to utilize the metrics to coach as opposed to bash, right? You have to have a culture that says it's okay to report this information. Because if not, let's say I roll this out to everybody, you guys all go out and look at hard hats and safety glasses and everybody's 100% safe. Does that make me a better, safer organization? No, not necessarily. Okay, so a couple quotes real quick. A man who starts out going nowhere, he generally gets there. We need to have a process that we can manage, right? The better it is empirically, meaning data, the better you can organize that. But if we just go out and say, hey, everybody go out and fill out these BBS cards, and then we get them in and they're all pencil whipped, and we roll our eyes and go, why are we doing this? We need to change our process. Okay, that's this quote right here. And then the other one is everybody can be improved, or everything can be improved. And the quality of observations can certainly be improved, right? There's certainly a methodical approach to doing it. Now, does the safety person have to do the coaching either? No. We have one organization where the frontline supervisor is taught how to get the data and how to coach the observer, right? And then the safety person can kind of be an extra outlet to catch, hey, anybody who has 0 observations, let's go figure out why. Or everybody with, in the bottom 5th percentile, I'll personally go out and, walk with, right? So you have to break it up so it's not just the safety person, okay? So there's my contact information. I have a booth just inside and to the right. If you guys want to see more screenshots or talk about this further, 45 minutes, I basically said, hey, there's life out there that says, or data out there that says you can do this if you put your mind to it. So I'll leave you with this last thought. Think about how you currently collect your observations and just answer one question. Can I improve what I'm currently doing? If the answer is yes, then I hope you take some of these concepts back with you. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.